So there's really no one way to particularly manage files, but you want to be on the same page as a team. So making sure that everyone knows how you're going to do it is really important.
When we talk about RDM practices, if we assume that everyone will operate and, store their files in the exact same way, it takes away the notion that your file system should be somewhat intuitive. I don't know.
I think if the filing process is understood by everybody, then it will be easier to go in and pick data from each of these 4 countries and analyze it as you need to. So that's how we're approaching it. It's gonna be really huge.
Well, usually we would have like folder, for example, and then / carpeta. So one word, simple. Or sometimes we'll say folder 1, Ayacucho, for example, and that is about first set of interviews. Folder 2, Ayacucho, and that would be second interview. So conversation circles, Ayacucho, and then that will make it easier from the get-go, visual, right? And again, simplicity to me, and then it will also allow accessibility to my partners in the Global South to say, okay, Ayacucho, folder 1, this is where I'm going. But if I make it more complex, it becomes a nightmare.
Something that makes it useful and helpful for you, and just, I don't want to come back to a project years later and be like, where did I store that? Because it's not something that I built for myself. It's something that I adopted because somebody else told me to.
Data that have been altered go into a different folder than the original data set. Similarly, documents that have been altered go into a different folder compared to the original, versus, the problematic naming conventions where you just write, updated or altered. And so I think that is one of the main strategies that I would say.
It's the folder structure of anything you're working on. So it's easy to just open folders, open folders, open folders, open folders, and then at the end of the day, you're like, okay, how do I get this document and which particular folder is it in? But just having, a good structure and knowing okay, this is where I'm going to have things that I'm working on, and then things that I'm done working and I've posted, and just, just having those structures in place. It's not something that you get done in a day. It's something that you have to be intentional about creating and following it through. So yeah,
the naming convention for the file still have to be applied to the folder too. So whatever folder you created, the folder has to have a name with the date of the folder and then the location of the folder as well. And then you having subfolders.
And to have a folder that's designated for different projects or different stages of projects versus what we had done in the past where it was coded based on the researcher. And so then you have these overlapping files where several researchers are doing the same thing, but they're spread across these multiple folders. So instead, it's almost like embedding that within the folders that are more specific to, program files, data files, manuscript files, or some of the other metadata, for example.
And I think people might disagree with me, but don't have subfolders. That's also, I don't know if that's a relevant piece of advice, but I think the more subfolders you have, the harder it is to find things. And then also, people don't know that you would store it there, because I think that's what I'm trying to say overall, is it has to intuitively make sense for everyone.
Keeping it simple. To me, simplicity, is the best suggestion I can make.
We moved all of our files within Spark to Microsoft Teams. Microsoft Teams does not have an easy way to search for a particular team. They show up in the order that they were created, which is not very helpful. So we ended up at a point having, I want to say 40 different teams just for Spark things. And then I had a bunch of different teams for other things within the universities. Other people had other teams for things in the universities. And every single team had permissions around who could access it or not. it was a nightmare. So the system that made sense at the start had then exploded into something that didn't make sense at all. And we had no choice but to sort of go back and systematically arrange things so that we weren't having to find one of 70 teams.
It would be a great idea for me to have like a home folder with just blank informed consent, blank of the the documenting verbal consent, so that people can then pull from and then rewrite.
As work evolves, your needs around your file systems may evolve too. And so to be comfortable with the idea that at some point you may need to make changes to your file system.
This series is brought to you by SPARC, a Center for Social Research Innovation.